Hey guys, it's Sarah from Book Nerds and Fangirls, and today I'll be ranking my books in order from worst to best of 2019. Now, 2019 was a steady reading year. I got 17 books read by the time I finished 2019. It wasn't as much as I was hoping. I had put 30 originally on my Goodreads goal, and I did not meet that goal because I'm a workaholic. I work a lot. That, and I was also obsessed with movies and television shows this year, so I put reading on the back burner. So hopefully in 2020 my reading year will be better. But I got 17 books here. I arranged them from the worst book of 2019 to the best book of 2019 in my opinion. And with that being said, I would like to state that just because I liked a book doesn't mean you have to like a book. Just because I hate a book doesn't mean you have to hate the book. We're all adults here. We're all entitled to our opinions. So without further ado, let's get started with the video. So coming in at number 17, which is my least favorite book of the year, is Hidden Bodies by Carolyn Kepnes. Now, I had read You earlier this year, and I had thoroughly enjoyed it to where it nagged one of my top rankings, and we'll discuss it in a minute. But You was so intriguing, and I loved Jo's perspective. It was an intriguing tale, and I loved reading from Jo's point of view because you don't really see novels from point of views of a stalker. So I was a little intrigued, and it was really good. The TV show is better. Don't get me wrong, I love the TV show way more than I love the books, but that first book was good. And then I read the second book, and it went to shit. So I probably wouldn't have finished this book series if it wasn't for Audible. No, I'm not sponsored by Audible like every other YouTuber is here, but Audible is great. Great. I highly recommend Audible if you haven't signed up for it yet. But the interesting thing about these audiobooks is that they're read by Santino Fantoya, who plays Greg in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, the original one. So I found it pretty enjoyable listening because of that. But the first book, Jo was so sarcastic and funny, and like you loved to hate him. Wouldn't love a guy like that in real life. But you just loved reading about him and loved reading about if he would get caught or not. And then the second book happened, and everything that was intriguing about Jo in the first book faded away to where he was almost unrecognizable, and every trait that we loved in the first book got on our nerves in the second book, and I did not enjoy that. I also did not enjoy his love interest, Love. Yes, her name is Love. Love. We'll be discussing them whenever I get to my best and worst couples of 2019 list. But my god, I have never met a more one-dimensional love interest. And I really had a lot of problems with like how things went about with Jo in this book. In the television show, which just had its season 2, they had a more logical reason why Jo was in LA in the first place, and I really liked that direction as well as the direction they went with Love in the TV show. But she was so one-dimensional in the books that I was just like, why is Jo fascinated with this woman? I had no idea. I couldn't even tell you what had happened to her in that book because I totally forgot her character. That's how unforgettable she was. That, and I always also had a problem with how every girl seemed to be on Jo's dick, but not in the first book. So, just because you're in a new state doesn't mean you become more attractive, just saying. So I don't think it would actually necessarily happen like that. I just wish she would have stayed true to character and true to form. And Hidden Bodies may or may not have been a good book because, there's only so much you could get away with in these type of novels, and it was starting to get a little bit, unrealistic. So I didn't particularly like it. I actually really hated it. And everything I loved about You was foiled by this book, and it made me hate it more. So if you have read You and you want to know about hidden bodies, I would suggest not reading this book because it's worthless, and I would just suggest watching You Season 2 on Netflix because they did a way better job with this by adding characters in that you wouldn't expect and adding storylines and switching up the ending, to which I preferred more than the book. The book in some ways. Not in other ways, but in some. So coming in at number 16 is gonna be a very controversial one. I know a lot of people love this book. They rant and rave about this book. I'm gonna be the lesser. I'm gonna rant about this book. And this book is Eliza and Her Monsters. Now, to be fair to this book, I am not in the age demographic for this book. And before the ending happened, or quote unquote the conflict happened, I was actually kind of enjoying this book. It wasn't anything to rave about. I did like the mental health representation in this book. Yes, but putting that aside, I hated everything else about this book. I hated the way Eliza treated her family in this book. I totally understood Eliza's parents, even though they were totally oblivious to what was happening in their daughter's life in this book. Her brothers were kind of annoying, but it's siblings, so I could do that. What I couldn't handle and what I don't get about this book is everybody's obsession with the character Wallace. Now, I'm gonna go into mild spoilers in here for why I did not enjoy this character. So wait until I put down this shiny bag before we get out spoilers, so the non-spoilery people could understand why I hated this book. So, goodbye to people who have not read Eliza and Her Monsters yet. We'll come back when I'm on my number 15 choice. Okay, so the main reason why I hated this book was because of Wallace. Now, Wallace was okay at first. I could deal with, the teenagers that won't get along with their parents because, they're pressured to be perfect for them. Yeah, I get that. I get what that feels like. But what I could not forgive Wallace for was how he treated Eliza when he figured out who she was. I mean, yeah, sure, your girlfriend is the author of a famous webcomic that you write fanfiction for, but I don't think acting like a fucking man-child is actually the way to go about it. Do you have a reason to be pissed at her? Maybe. I don't really know the situation. But what I hate about Wallace is how he acted like it was the end of the world that Eliza was the writer of this famous webcomic and how he treated her afterwards because, and I quote, he did not talk to her until he needed something from her. He didn't talk to her until he got a book deal for that one. Now, I could do a suspension of disbelief at some parts, but I don't think that he would actually get a book deal for this. First off, it would be her book deal first. She's a creator of this web series. She could partner with him, yes, but he can't take her original idea like that unless those book companies want to be sued, because they can be, because he's not the original creator. Putting that aside, I did not like how he did not talk to Eliza for weeks on end until he needed something from her. He needed her to complete her web series, and whenever she said she fucking mentally could not do that, whenever she was being harassed, by the way, what was his reaction? Not to understand, no. His reaction was to tell her, well, if you won't do this for me, then go fuck yourself. It was basically what he said to her. And that got my blood boiling. Not because he just talked to her because of the book deal, but with how whiny he was about it, too. Like, oh my god, my life is so horrible. horrible, and all I got going it was this, and you're such a bitch because you won't put your hard work on the line for me and your credibility on the line for me so I could get a book deal. And, and this is people's man crush Monday. I just don't fucking get that. I would be like, okay, see ya, bitch. And then when she tries to apologize, which gets my blood boiling as well, because she shouldn't be the one to apologize for him acting like a man-child. What was his reaction? I don't want you in my life because you're selfish. And then it takes her trying to commit suicide for her to get him to talk to her, and then it's kind of like he gets everything he wants in the end. I'm all like, no, fuck no. This boy is awful, and I don't get why girls like him. Because if this was my boyfriend, you could bet your ass I would kick his ass to the curb. But that's why I didn't like it. So, long rant over. Like I said, I don't enjoy Wallace as a love interest. If you guys haven't read the book, I would suggest, seeing reviews for why Wallace is just the worst YA love interest in the world. And then you would probably get my feelings. So because of that, Eliza and Her Monsters ranked very low. It could have been a very impactful story if not the love interest had sucked. And, Eliza sucked too, so there's that. So coming in at number 15 is To Make Monsters Out of Girls. Now, this one is a short poetry collection, and I had been devouring Rupi Kaur's poetry collection, and I heard Amanda Lovelace also had some pretty good poetry collections, so I read this one and I did not mesh well with it. Doesn't mean that a lot of people could not relate to her poetry, I just was not one of those people that could relate, so that was that one. So coming in at number 14 is Hold Still by Nina LaCour, and this is the only reason why it's on this list, the worst list, is because I can't remember it. It was a very forgettable story. I can't even tell you the main character's name to save my life. Same with number 13, An Anonymous Girl. I was intrigued when I read it, when I was reading it. It had a pretty interesting synopsis from what I could remember. I loved the little cat and mouse game that was happening between the two main protagonists, but it was forgettable. Now, coming in at number 12 was Final Girls by Riley Sager. I did like the premise of this. I did like the whole murderer coming after the final girls, and it was a very intriguing premise. I kind of sort of guessed who it was at the ending of the novel, so I thought that was pretty interesting. But it didn't do enough to impress me for it to be exactly memorable. So coming in at number 11 is Confessions of a Shopaholic by Sophie Kinsella. This was my most recent read and the one I ended 2019 with. I love Becky's shenanigans and the book was hilarious. And her relationship with Luke was kind of sweet. I wish there was more of that in the story, honestly, but it's about shopaholics, so I get why there wasn't a lot more of it, but cute nevertheless. So coming in at number 10 is Sadie by Courtney Summers. This book was okay. I didn't really get the hype surrounding it. Everyone says it's such a great book. I guess I'm just not one of those hype queens that read every hyped book and think that every hyped book is a masterpiece. Now this book, I did like the dual perspective of it. I like how it's told in multimedia ways, and the audiobook is actually pretty legit for it too. But it's the ending that didn't really satisfy me with this one. There were a couple of intriguing parts to Sadie that caught my attention that I wish had been focused on more, and it probably would have hiked my ranking up tremendously. but it still fell a little short for me. So number 10 isn't bad for this list. It was just okay. So coming in at number 9 is Redeemed by PC and Christian Cass. Yes, I finally did finish the House of Night series, finally. I've only been working on it since 10th grade of high school. So I finally finished it. It was an okay ending. I don't really like who Zoe ended up with. Like I said, I don't like Stark and Zoe as a couple, so every time they were coupling, I'm just like, bleh. But luckily for me, there wasn't a lot of Zoe and Stark being a couple scenes, thank God. And the love stories took a back burner to the immediate problem, which was Nefret in this book. So it was intriguing. I think that how it ended was a little bit too wrapped up in a neat little bow. Like, it was just a predictable ending, and I could have seen it from far away. Like, Zoe Redbird is one of my least favorite protagonists in a young adult adaptation ever. And if you want me to make a video as to why she's one of my least favorite protagonists, I might do that soon. But as far as the House of Night series went, I think it went on way too long. They could have condensed it in a 6-book series and it would have been amazing. But they chose to keep it going, and now I hear there's a spin-off series, which I will not be reading because I've had enough of this series. 12 books is good enough for me. So coming in at number 8 is 30 Life Crisis by Alicia Schwartz. I actually got a biography in this year, guys. I think it was short, sweet, to the point. I do like some of the circumstances of being 30 because I will be turning 27 this year. I'm closer to my 30s than I am my 20s now, so it was actually nice to read a book about someone in their 30s. 30s trying to navigate the world, one situation at a time. And I like Lisa Schwartz as a YouTuber, so I read her book. It was an okay book. Not many people read it, but I enjoyed it. I especially like the whole tribute at the beginning that was written by Shane. I think it's called a Ford. I liked his part of it. I did like the story of how she met Jeff too and their first date. That was adorable. I do like, her friends because her friends were a prominent part of this novel. So I actually really liked this book. And congratulations to Lisa too, because she got engaged this year. So that was pretty awesome. And so did Shane, believe it or not. That's actually quite interesting too. But enough about that. It was a good book. That's all I'm gonna say. So coming in at number 7 is Nowhere Girls by Amy Reed. I actually thoroughly enjoyed this book. I love the commentary that it takes on sexual assault and rape culture. And I love the 3 main characters and how they don't seem like they're the same voice. You could tell who's talking about what. But I love how it started a discussion in schools and how girls were getting sick of the rape culture in their hometown that forced one girl to move because of how bad it got for her. I think this is a tremendous novel that is very important and should be read in schools. And that's all I'm gonna say about that because I do like this. I also like the strong relationship between the 3 main protagonists in this one, and I like how it wrapped up very realistic to the situation at hand in society today. So good job, Nowhere Girls, you deserve the spot. So coming in at number 6 is On the Come Up by Angie Thompson. Now, I read The Hate U Give last year, I believe, and I enjoyed it. I think this second novel wasn't as great, but I do like some of the commentary about it. I like the struggles that Bree faces in it. I'm just not particular to the situations that are happening here. I didn't feel like I connect with the main character at all. At all. I could understand what she was going through, and I could sympathize with her, but because I could never be in that situation, I couldn't relate. So that's why the ranking was so low for me. So coming in at number 5 is On Honeymooners by the duo pair Christina Lauren. Lauren, who I didn't know was a duo pair until I heard several booktubers mention that they're duo pairs. So the Unhoneymooners follows two people that actually hate each other, and they're at a wedding, and the couple are their brother and their sister, not, together, they're not related. His brother is marrying her sister, so everyone gets sick at the wedding because of food poisoning, and they have to go on their honeymoon instead. So shenanigans ensue, and this book was pretty great. I laughed my ass off through most of it. I'll definitely pick up more Christina Lauren books in the future. But they're definitely a good couple. I did like how they got together and how everything happened in this book. I really hope I didn't spoil everyone for the honeymooners, but it's a good book. So coming in number 4 will actually shock people because I did not like this book as much as everyone else did, and that's Daisy Jones and the Six. Now, I'm not going to say that this book is bad by any means. I like how it deals with drug use and alcoholism, and I like the music part of this too. But there was something about Daisy Jones and the Six that did not resonate with me as much as it did everyone else. Maybe because when it comes to the music industry, I'm very picky about what I read about it. And this one was okay. I don't think it was groundbreaking. I liked a couple parts of Daisy Jones and the Six. I liked every time I read from Daisy's point of view because she was my favorite character. Not so much about Bobby's, but I did love his wife, Camilla, and as well as, like, all the other bandmates, and I did like the interview format. I did like how this was being told through interviews, and who the interviewer ended up being. I enjoyed that part of the book, too. It just wasn't my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. We'll get to that one in a minute. But I did enjoy it. So coming in at number 3 is something that I never thought in my years of life I would finish, and that was It by Stephen King. Now, with It by Stephen King, I have been reading this book since 2017. Yes, you heard that right. It has taken me 2 years to get through this ginormous book, and I did not regret it for a second. Now, if you don't know the story of it is basically following a group of kids as they try to discover what is terrorizing their hometown of Derry, Maine. And this one is actually pretty great. If you haven't read it yet, I would suggest totally doing the audiobook. The guy for this audiobook is why I ended up getting through it, because I was halfway through this book already, and I just didn't want to read anymore. I thought, 600 pages was alright, and I could just DNF it because I was not meshing well with the adult parts of this book. Now, the kid parts were fantastic. Every time that they would tell their perspective from when they were kids, I would thoroughly enjoy it, because this is where they're dealing with Pennywise the most. I think if I had one huge complaint about this novel, it would be that there was not enough of the main antagonist in it, which was Pennywise the clown. I love Pennywise as a character not in the way everyone thinks. I think he is a pretty awesome antagonist, and I would love to see more antagonists like Pennywise out there, because Pennywise isn't bad. Well, he's bad. He's horrible, but he doesn't have intentions for being horrible. He didn't get abused as a child. He didn't grow up in a bad society. No. He's evil for the sake of being evil, and I actually thoroughly enjoy that because I hate it when they try to give bad antagonists reasons to be evil. Sometimes evil is just evil, and I did like Pennywise in this book because of that, because they weren't trying to make it any more than it was. He's just straight up evil, and that's perfectly fine with me. Makes him better as an antagonist that way. Now, one thing that did not mesh with me well was the adult parts of this book. I find Stephen King's writing to be very intriguing during some parts, but some parts were way too descriptive for me. One part that I absolutely hated reading about was I did not need 2 pages of what was in a medicine cabinet. Like, descriptive writing is all fair and good and great and all, but that was one part that put me off the most, and that was when I realized maybe the adult parts would not be intriguing for me, and, you know, the ending was fair. I didn't really like it as much, but shit happens. So, as far as It goes, it was a pretty good book. It was my number 3. I just wish that the adult parts had been, you know, better, more enticing and intriguing, but they weren't. And, you know, when you have multi-perspective, not everything could be tied in a nice little bow. So I appreciate the effort for this book. Stephen King is an absolutely amazing writer. I'm planning on reading The Institute this year. Fingers crossed that I could get through that one. I got like a 9-hour flight, so hopefully I get through that one. But this one's my number 3, and that's probably because it took me 2 years to get it. And the feeling of finally accomplishing this definitely makes it worth putting it in my number 3. So coming in at number 2 is something I mentioned beforehand, and that's You by Caroline Kepnes. I was so sad that Hidden Bodies was so far below in this book because You was everything I wanted in a book. But coming off the whole bad guys are bad just because they're bad movement, Joe does have some reasons for why he is the way he is, but I don't think they're really voiced in the You novel, so Joe's a bad guy for the sake of being a bad guy, but I feel like Joe has narcissistic personality disorder is why he is the way he is. Not diagnosed, but Joe is definitely a narcissist, and he feels like girls need to be protected, and he needs to be the one to protect them, but he does it in such extreme ways, and he ends up stalking this girl named Beck, and then, you know, shenanigans ensue, yada yada. Now, like I said, what was intriguing about this book was finding out all the different ways that Joe actually got all this information, how he found Beck, what he found out about her just through stalking her, and how it just keeps on upping the ante every chapter it gets. We get closer and closer, and then that ending was what made it 5 stars. It was creepy, per se. Joe is a creepy protagonist because unlike Pennywise, who is Stephen King's imagination, Joe could be an everyday person. You have met a Joe once in your life, I guarantee it. And that's what was so unsettling about this book, is because it's based off realism, because people like Joe do exist out in this world, and that's why we need to be careful with the information we put out, who we trust in our lives and who we don't, because, you know, your average Joe might be actual Joe, so let's be careful about that. So this was a great book. I liked, and it's even blurred by Stephen King, so you know it's gotta be good if the King of Horror is, you know, praising it. So finally, we came to my favorite book of 2019. It was a struggle between this one and You by Caroline Kepnes, but I had to go with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Yes, I knew this one came out in 2018. No, I did not read it until 2019. But this centers around Monique, who is a journalist, and she is interviewing this starlet starlet named Evelyn Hugo. Because at first she thinks she's just going there interview for a dress and charity event, but no, it turns out Evelyn Hugo wants to write the biography of her life story, and she wants Monique to do it. For her. And through this story, we connect with Evelyn and Monique in so many different ways. I love the relationships that Evelyn goes through and her struggles of becoming an actress when she is Hispanic. That was a very intriguing thing to read about because it's based on the 60s, and, you know, it was very intriguing. It was definitely a different time back then. I loved reading about old Hollywood, and I loved reading Evelyn's perspective. Whenever Evelyn was reciting her story back to Monique, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the Evelyn parts, and she's like one of my favorite characters, even though she is a flawed character, which I love so much. I also love the bisexual representation in this book. We do not get enough bisexual representation in literature nowadays, and I'm glad that this one had a very respectable representation of bisexuality. It made me so happy and my heart full of life, and I do love and cherish each and every one of Evelyn's relationships and how the 7 husbands came to be. And I absolutely adore Cecilia as well. I'm not going to spoil who Cecilia is for everyone who hasn't read it yet, but it was definitely a great and intriguing book, and I'm just, like, so happy that I read it. But there you guys have it. That was my best and worst books of 2019. What was your favorite and least favorite book of 2019? Comment down below and let me know, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!